welcome back, y'all. So, today we're doing a little something different. So, we're not covering a certain movie or anything today. I wanted to talk a little bit about something where, it's a little bit of a cult type of thing. But I actually wanted to talk to somebody who currently has a new book coming out that actually talks about the Twilight Zone in particular. So, my guest today is, I mean, his resume is quite impressive. So he is a television producer, he's a writer, he's a director. He has written on such TV shows as 30-something back from like the 80s and 90s, where he did win an Emmy Award back in 1989, and also a Humanis Award as well, which is, I think, a writer award, which is kind of cool. He's also written on Judging Amy, Saving Grace, Pretty Little Liars, which he was also an executive producer on as well. So he helped get that, up and rolling. And he is also the writer of the HBO film Cast a Deadly Spell. But welcome to my show, the one, the only, Mr. Joseph Dougherty. Hi, Joe. How
Oh,
are you?
I'm fine. I'm so glad I'm the only one. I would,
Right.
I don't think
Exactly.
I don't think I could afford the upkeep on more than one of me.
Literally.
Thank you so much for asking me to talk about this stuff.
Of course, yes. Yeah, I got reached out to by a book publisher or book publicist of yours. And
Yep.
it was interesting because like I was like, oh, the Twilight Zone, like, yeah, sure. Like I'd like to talk to this guy. Like, why not? But I want to talk to you a little bit, Joe. So I guess for listeners and all that, I kind of went over what you do for a living and what you have been doing. But I guess for me, if anything, what I want to hear from you about. So the book that you have is called, remind me what the title is. I'm so
Oh,
sorry.
it's
I know it's Rod Serling.
Rod Serling at 100 because we've just had his
Yes.
100th birthday on Christmas Day.
Gotcha. So, of course, this is about Rod Serling. The book's obviously about Rod Serling, but we, of course, probably you do talk about the Twilight Zone because it's literally one of his biggest things, if not the biggest thing he's known for.
Yeah.
So just to get a little bit out of the way, like what made you want to write this book in particular? Like what was the inspiration for it? And yeah, what was your process with it? Did you go to like a coffee shop and like type it out or like I don't know, just like what was your sort of process during the whole writing period?
Okay, here's a sidebar. I was never a coffee shop writer until I wrote for Pretty Little Liars. And then for some reason there was something about those scripts I could only write them in coffee shops. Well, the Sterling I'm a sufficiently old person to have been young when the Twilight Zone was first broadcast. And I kind of fell under the spell of it. Because of it being so bold and so well put together and so beautifully written, and also, it was a point you got to remember in 1960 when science fiction was not considered adult fiction. And I think one of the main things that Rod Serling did was he made that kind of writing popular. I don't think you get Gene Roddenberry without him. I don't think you get Chris Carter without him. Jordan Peele. I just don't think you get these creative people if Rod hadn't done what he had done. Specifically December 25th, 2024 was his 100th birthday. And I kind of felt that if I was going to write about him, if I was going to write about the scripts, if I was going to write about what I admired about him, I should do it now while I could at least kind of seem to dovetail on a wider interest in him at the moment. He's a fascinating guy. He grew up in the East Coast in Binghamton, New York, and he enlisted in the Army 3 days after his high school graduation during World War II, and had the experiences of an 18-year-old experienced the Philippines and the war like so many other men and women was something that our forces just weren't prepared for. And one of the things Serling did when he came back, he said, I have to write. I have to write. I have to process this. I have to get this out. And that kind of passion has always been part of why I've liked him. He created The Twilight Zone, a show which has been off the air for 60 some odd years now, but you can still walk out in the corner and say the name of the show and people will know who it is, what it is. And he died way too young. He was only 50 when he died in 1975. And I just kind of wanted to take a look at why I liked his writings, what I thought was important about it. And I want, I want to say happy birthday.
No, totally. That makes a lot of sense. And I think if anything, it seems like, at least from what I'm hearing, like he obviously was an inspiration for you. Of course, how could he not be? Especially if you were one of those kids growing up who liked science fiction or horror fiction or any of those things. I can definitely understand the horror part of it too. I grew up a horror kid.
Yeah.
So of
And
course the
I
Twilight.
think as I said, I think he made it permissible for us to like this stuff
I agree. He
as we
made
grew
it.
up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Because like you were saying, like I think that it's so interesting because he has there are so many people who are inspired by him, yourself included, but like you said, Gene Roddenberry who made Star Trek, and if it wasn't for someone like Rod Serling and also the Lucille Ball of course too because that's a whole
Yeah.
thing, but like if it wasn't for those people, to be inspiring, to give someone a chance like that, you wouldn't have something like Star Trek or, like you said, Jordan Peele or a lot of different horror people too. I'm sure they're like, as soon as I saw William Shatner on that Nightmare at 20,000 feet, I'm telling you something. You know what I mean? Like they knew this is something different. And what's crazy is that not even crazy, but like it's crazy. It's interesting to think, I guess, that this was being broadcast into your house on a big three network.
Yes.
When
Yeah.
has that happened? Like that has not happened since.
It was either my parents were very indulgent or neglectful, but I was allowed to watch it on Friday nights when it was on late. It was on like 9:30 in the
Right.
evening. But
Right.
I mean, he had gone through, before the Twilight Zone, he was a tremendously well-respected dramatic writer. He was
Mhm.
writing live television, things like Requiem for Heavyweight and Velvet Alley and Patterns. He'd already won his first, I think he'd run his first three of the six Emmys he would win for writing. But he was getting pushback from censors. He wanted to talk about more serious topics. He wanted to talk about what we have to watch out for in politics and the way we treat each other. And he said, I don't know how casually he said this, but he was talking about one show. He said, I could have, they wouldn't let me talk about. He wrote an episode of a dramatic series set in the United States Senate, but they wouldn't let him say anything in the script that would indicate any reference to any real senator to the point where he couldn't have a bottle of Coca-Cola on the set because that came from Georgia. And he said at the time, he said, I could have set this thing in the future and put a bunch of robots in the Senate and no one would have bothered me and it probably would have been just as effective. And if you look at the 100, I think it's 161 episodes of which he wrote 90 some odd. There he is using speculative fiction, not just inhabiting it, not just doing a good job at it, but actually using it as a tool to talk to people about our. He was a very socially conscious writer. Was also a great entertainer, which is rare. And again, the Roddenberrys and the Jordan Peels is that television shows, even anthology television shows, had hosts. But you can look people in the eye and say Rod Serling was the first showrunner the way we understand it. And of course, he loved that. He was not shy.
Right. I always hope that people, and I know sometimes it depends on, how they handle their money and everything. You being a writer, I always think when it comes to actors and writers, you all are some of y'all can be very good at squirreling away money, which makes sense for your profession. Just because
Oh,
you have
I
to.
loved. Yes, it's either scrolling it away or occasionally we go down and get like a bunch of mason jars and bury cash
Like
in the
literally.
backyard, which is why I'm not giving you my address. But
Right, right.
yeah, it's somebody once said something about the theater says you can make a killing in the theater, but you can't make a living.
Right, exactly. But even
And
with that, like it's a matter of like I just hope that like he obviously had like a good estate. Like he had good money, even after he passed away. Like you said he died way
yeah,
too early,
I'm
but
sure he
yeah.
did. I'm sure he did. There are some sad things about him in the later life, in that I talk about this in the book because it
Hmm.
annoys the living hell out of me, is that it's hard. He doesn't seem confident of his own legacy. He says, "Oh, my work was good," but it won't last. It not. And I think I may be wrong about this, so I don't want to misspeak myself. I think he sold the Twilight Zone to CBS and kind of walked away from it. He wanted to do other things. Of course, how do you walk away from the Twilight Zone? It haunted him in a way, in that, I mean, if you were, again, it's like, oh, that when the Night Gallery came out, we thought, oh, this is going to be as good as the Twilight Zone. But it was television had changed in just 10 years in terms of what could get on and what couldn't get on.
Yeah, and even something like the other revivals that they did, which they did the one in the 80s, they did the one in the 2000s, and then they did the Jordan Peele one, of course, too. But even those, like, they are going to be categorically different. Even in name, they're going to be the same, but like they're just going to be different because they're run by different people, and
Yeah,
our
yeah.
times have changed, so it's just interesting to look at that. But like you were saying, even before, like, just horror anthologies in general, which I love horror anthologies. Like I grew up on Goosebumps, Are You Afraid of the Dark, all that stuff, and that's very much in the, it's been touted of like, Are You Afraid of the Dark was like, Twilight Zone for kids because it was just a bunch of people around a campfire telling stories.
Yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense. Although, Goosebumps had its book series, so that makes sense. But, in this situation, like it is very much like there's such a debt to someone like Rod Serling, who affected horror fiction, and horror media in general, but also the sci-fi, media as well. That's really cool. And yeah, I just I think for me, my history with it was really, I mean, of course I grew up seeing some of it. I always remember the sci-fi. I don't even know if they do them anymore because TV is different, but the sci-fi marathons,
They
all
still do
the
them. Actually, other
okay,
stations
good,
do them as well. Yeah, Paramount does
nice.
them. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and then it's now on Paramount Plus. So if you do have Paramount Plus, you can watch it, which is cool. Um, but yeah. So a little bit, I'd love to hear, what you think about Rod Serling, and we'll come back to it. But I do want to
Yeah,
find out a little bit more about some of the other things you have done, just since I do have you
sure.
here.
Sure.
So I did want to mention too, I just watched your film, because we could definitely talk about, why should we care about a person that, died however many years ago, and like why should we care about the thing he made? And there's definitely reasons. But I
Yeah.
wanted to kind of know a little bit more about, like, I guess for me, like, you don't have to go through your whole like history, but like, I guess, like, how did you get started in the entertainment industry? Like, obviously you grew up enjoying something like Rod Serling and the Twilight Zone. Must have enjoyed that, from since we're talking. But I kind of want to know, like, how did you, like, what was your education background, I guess, like, to get you into being a writer and all this? And also just like kind of what was your trajectory into the entertainment field where you still are today? I'd love to hear a little bit about that because it just
I-
lets me know you a little.
I'm yes. Well, but let's begin with the fact that I'm probably underqualified for what I do. When I was a kid, I was, now we sometimes just say, oh, I want to be a storyteller, which kind of covers a lot of ground. But I think I'm, one of the things that guarantees your career as a writer is having a bad time in high school. Well, it's like you kind of go into yourself. You read more. You go to the movies by yourself. And I just liked what was happening. I liked the idea of the stories. I liked the impact they were having on me. The education is pretty. I don't. I mean, I couldn't afford to go to film school, which is probably the luckiest break I ever had. And then when I got out of college, I just, oddly enough, I kept waiting for people to knock on my door and hire me to write. And I don't know, they just weren't showing up. They weren't there. And I tried to get a couple of things going. I wrote a couple of movies that nobody wanted to make. And then I did something which was, and then I wrote a play because I said, well, let me see if I can do this. And it was the play that got produced in New York first before anything else. And it was the play that was read by the producers of Thirtysomething. And they said, oh, we'd like to have this guy work on the show. And Thirtysomething was this astonishing springboard for me. Um,
Nice. Yeah.
and I've just been kind of like, they've been phases of the career about like
Ebbs and flows.
when you want to be in charge, when you don't want to be in charge, when you want to go home at 6 o'clock and maybe not hang around the office with problems. The movie you're talking about, Cast a Deadly Spell,
Yeah,
was which let's say, all right, it is an occult noir, as I like to call it.
it
It
is.
is, yeah,
Yes.
it was me asking myself the question, if two writers I liked wrote together or wrote for each other's magazines, what would it look like? And that's Raymond
Hmm.
Chandler and H.P. Lovecraft. So I figured I'd write a Chandler Cthulhu story, which is what I did. And I did it. I wrote it in an apartment in Jackson Heights, Queens, when I just could not get arrested.
Right.
Nothing was happening for me. In many ways, it was a pep talk to me. I said, "Look, I'll write something that'll make you feel good about yourself as a writer.
Hmm.
Let's do that." And then it went through a couple of false starts and ended up at HBO late in the 20th century. And we made the movie, and it's never gone away. The H.P. Lovecraft people have always been
Yeah.
very good about it. It's been shown at festivals and things like that. And what happened I think it started a couple of years ago, and now they gave it this beautiful new transfer. It's on Max, and it's a
Hmm.
couple of other Warner Brothers places too. And it looks great. And it's interesting, it was made in the 90s.
Hmm.
So it kind of has a certain handmade quality to it since it's before CG.
Yeah. And that's what's
And
crazy too. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
no, no, no.
No, I was gonna say because it's crazy to think that like this movie was 91. And I just watched it a few days ago because I was like, I'm gonna talk to this guy. I guess I should watch this movie. And it is like just some of the stuff that you get to, that was brought to life from your story. It is like, imagine Cthulhu, imagine the weird shit that comes from Lovecraft stories and put it into a film noir from the 40s. Like kind of
Yeah.
sort of like it's what it is.
It made sense to me, but
Yes.
and also it's interesting. I mean, the cast is great. Fred Ward, who passed away, and David
Literally
Warner.
Julianne Moore before anybody really knew her like that. Like
Julianne Moore was so not she did not think she would get that role. She said, I'm just a soap
like
opera
I'm
actress.
I'm
I'm
a
not
soap
going to
opera
get that."
person. Like whatever.
Yeah,
Like who cares? And then you literally become one of the most famous actresses in the world, girl. Like how do
I
you
know.
like what?
I'd love to take credit for that, but I think she had something to do with it.
Right.
And also behind the camera, Martin Campbell, who's
Yeah.
directed a couple of James Bond films, and the spectacular producer Gail Hurd, who
Yeah.
worked with James Cameron and created Terminator and Aliens.
And it's cool too because like you get to have that because there was a sequel I don't think you were involved with because it wasn't your story, but it is
I know I wrote
a
it. I
little.
wrote it, but I was kind of it's not there was not a happy experience. I was
That's fair.
they yeah, I wrote it and they picked a director and I said, "Okay, well I'll come in and talk to the director." And
Right.
then then there was a little silence on the phone and it was, "Well, he doesn't want to meet you."
And you're like, oh, well,
Oh, well, uh good luck with that.
have fun, I guess,
Yeah.
because yeah, like
The result is a lot of people come up to me about say they like the first film, then they say, "What happened to the other one?" I said,
I know.
oh,
Yeah,
well,
like
life goes on."
we see what happens, like we see how it can be connected, but we're like, I don't know. No, I haven't even watched that.
It would have been, but the
You
first
brought
one's
back
there, and the first one's great, and I'm very
you
happy
brought
with
back
it.
that wonderful Jamaican lady. You would have had her in there. Oh,
Yeah,
like
but
come
they
on.
recast, but they recast her, so it's not the same actress.
What?
And there was no, I mean,
Oh
but
yeah. No,
yeah.
it's crazy. But no, and also I just think like it is such a cool movie and I probably would cover it on the show to be honest with you.
Oh,
Like because it is very much like in the vein it's also because it's an HBO movie, but it's in the vein of like I don't even know like how would you like if you had to take like modern examples, I guess. Of course you could say it's like a Lovecraftian film noir, right? But like
yeah.
if you had to take like modern examples, like how would you kind of say it's like this meets this a little bit to kind of give
What's
people an
interesting, I
idea of like
mean,
what it is.
yeah, what I think about basically is it's a mashup before we knew what a mashup was.
Agreed, yeah.
And the trick is to, I mean, you see noir choices
Yeah.
leaching into, and that's fine by me.
Yes.
couldn't do worse than that.
Yeah, the offices with like the blinds, like,
Yeah.
just this sort of like the way that LA can feel, I guess, like especially since a lot of
Yes.
those are set in that area.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
think, yeah. I
totally.
mean, I can't really, I mean, there's been some good, there've been some good movies in the 70s and the 2000s. But it is true. It's like if you wanted to do noir, you would have to graft it onto something else right now, or else they'd say it's old.
Yeah,
Uh,
totally.
which is so wrong in so many ways.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, we
It's
did it.
not,
I mean, one of the best
yeah.
things we did on Pretty Little Liars is that they actually let me make an episode in black and white.
Oh,
And,
nice.
and it was and it was on when we were shooting on the Warner Brothers lot, and we got to do all this noir stuff.
Hmm.
And I said, I'll only do this if we don't do it as a joke.
Yeah, that's fair.
We have to really do this. There's no, it's not gonna be a sketch. We're gonna do this for real.
No,
But they're beautiful.
totally.
They're beautiful images. I like the genre. I like the genre.
Yeah, no,
It's
it makes sense. And it's different magic than you would see. Like it's called magic in the movie, but it's really like it is, but it also is just like I said, it's like weird Lovecraftian, like
yeah.
weird monsters kind of, like a little bit
Yeah, the
horror,
thing,
like a tiny
yeah,
bit.
well, yes, we are all very proud of the porridge beast comes out of a pot of oatmeal.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it's like, I mean, I got to tell you, I kind of wrote it with a shotgun metaphor in mind, which is
Yeah.
basically everybody around Phil Lovecraft has compromised in some way,
Yes.
and he hasn't. And the people around him aren't satisfied that he's just decided not to do it. They think his decision to lead his particular life, his particular way, is somehow a judgment on them. And there's a need to stop him. There's a need to
Hmm.
stop him from not being like everybody else, which I guess could be
Right.
seen as a Rod Serling theme as well.
Sure. And there's also just like there's this it's not stigma, but it's kind of like the bad rap that Lovecraft gets because he was a raging racist, which makes sense.
Woof.
But but
It's a little, it gets a little hard there and there.
it does.
Whoa.
It does, but also it doesn't mean that you separate art from the artist if you can, and it doesn't mean that his books and stuff like that on haven't been made into really cool stuff. Color Out of
Yeah.
Space with Nick Cage
Yeah.
and Suitable Flesh by Joe Lynch, these different things that are Lovecraft stories, but it's like, yeah, but no, Lovecraft ultimately wasn't the best dude in general because he was living in this time,
Abe was, yeah. And
is different.
he's hard to translate because there's not a lot of dialogue.
Yeah,
And there's a lot of it's just, emotions.
totally.
It's boy, I mean, boy, I wish there was some writer somewhere that if you didn't dig deep enough, you wouldn't find something you didn't like. I mean,
Yeah.
they're people. It's just what are we going to do and how did it's
Yeah.
also you have to take it for the time that it was created.
Yeah.
It's a little hard to sometimes do
Yeah.
that. We're all so sensitive now.
We are. That's true. It was funny. It was funny. Of course, you said you worked on Pretty Little Liars. You were an executive producer on there. So you were a part of that team. I think it's cool. So correct me if I'm wrong. It's Elle Marlene King who is like the creator of that show, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Well, it's I'm Arlene Kang, who actually
Yes.
was I think she was the third person who took a try at adapting the novels because it was
Right.
a
Right.
YA series. And for some reason she got it right. She figured out how to do it.
I think it's because
Um
she did Now and Then from the 90s. She was the writer on
uh,
that.
sure,
So I don't
yes.
know.
It could be. It goes around sometimes.
Yeah, Leslie
Um
Linka Glotter. I don't know if you ever worked with her.
oh yes, I have. Yeah, and a
Yeah,
really good person.
yeah, and she, of course, she directed Now and Then. Which again, I Marlene, who, if I'm not mistaken, might be queer. I believe she is. Correct me if I'm wrong, but pretty sure I read that somewhere.
You know
I don't
what?
remember.
It's nobody's business but my own.
It's nobody's business, but you can probably find out for yourselves. Anyway,
Yeah, she
but
absolutely, absolutely.
but if you're interested, but it is cool that like this person, like you said, it got it right, and that's like so awesome. It was funny you say we're so sensitive. I was just I was just watching Mad Men. I've been watching Mad Men. And have you watched the show ever? Like,
I watched it. I wasn't knocked out by it the
sure.
way everybody else was.
No, that's
But
totally
but I
fair.
knew. I mean, it's like kind of like I knew I saw what they were going for, and I said, okay,
Yeah, totally. And it's the 60s and all this, but it's funny, not funny, but like it's interesting because there was an episode I just watched where one of the characters, Roger, at a party does blackface. And because of how we are as a society, rightfully so, they did have to put a disclaimer on that episode. Which I don't know if they did when they first aired it back in 2009. I don't remember. I don't know.
I
Um,
bet not.
I bet
You know,
not. Right.
you know where you can find a lot of those disclaimers over on the
Oh,
Disney Channel.
oh, yes. Which again, I don't mind because I'm like, at least you're not pretending you never did anything.
Yeah,
Like you're not pretending it's like not real. You're at least acknowledging it, which I can appreciate. But it's interesting, like something with like Mad Men, where why would you want to even have something like that on there? But it's like, well, it's a period piece,
it's a
and
period piece, and we've got this distance, and we're going to talk about it. It's always
yeah,
so
yeah.
it's really what kind of like I mean let's how big a warning do you have to put on Mickey Rooney and Breakfast at Tiffany's?
Yeah, it's a weird one with that too as well because ultimately that movie's fine. Like it's totally cool.
Yeah.
But it is egregious to see him in there and you're just like,
It's like,
this
where
was the
did this
60s,
come
dude.
from?
Like,
Yeah,
right,
but it looks it looks a little bit more like the 30s, but
yes, it's that's what makes it weird is that like otherwise it's a fine movie, but you're kind
yeah.
of wondering like Julie Andrews, what was your husband thinking? What's happening? Like
I don't know because the movies around it are so good. I mean,
right,
that's right
exactly.
in there, and I mean, because my one of
My
my
Fair Lady, like all these different things, right?
well, no, but Blake Edwards and his Experiment in Terror with Lee Remick, and yeah,
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
but yeah, it's there are some things that
Yeah.
I mean, there are some unapologetic things which nobody should have to look at, but the same
Right.
token, you can't you 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 have to admit it exists. You
I
have to
agree
admit,
too.
yeah, you have to admit that we were, we're not perfect.
Totally,
And
totally. And that comes back to Twilight Zone a little bit too, because I mean, this was a movie or it was a show that was made in the 60s,
yeah,
so again, it's a thing of like, not again, it's not as diverse because again, TV
no,
was only so diverse at that time, and of course we're trying to tell, and of course there's a lot of just like metaphors and a lot of, allegories that could be read into a little further. But again, the landscape of TV kind of only helped so much, really.
yeah, he tried on a couple of occasions of episodes where he was hiring
Right.
black
Right.
actors like Ivan Dixon and guys like that.
Totally.
But it was tough.
It's tough, right? And so it's just a product of the time, but it's a good product though, for
Yes.
sure. I
Well, it's
wanted
a
to
go,
talk.
and then I think it exists now. It goes beyond. It hasn't lost its
Yeah,
edge.
I agree.
You're talking about the book of other people and doing some more interviews. I've really been encouraged by finding out that there are a lot of people teaching the Twilight Zone in colleges,
100%. Yeah.
and that they
And
are
that's what's
not, and it
cool.
is not, and there's no, and the younger students are getting into it really deeply and understanding what's going forward, which was very
And
satisfying.
what's nice too is that they now have the ability to watch it. Like you can watch it kind of anywhere. You
Yeah,
can find it. And that's what's really nice. So you can be like, oh, it's not just the Treehouse of Horror episodes that are based off
right.
Twilight's episodes, which is fine too, but it's like you're able to really see the source material and see kind of where some of these stories of
Yeah,
kind of where they first started, which is cool. I wanted to talk a little bit before we get back to Twilight Zone, a little bit about your time on 30 something because you did win an Emmy
sure.
for it, which is
Yes, they
cool.
did, and they've
I
never asked for it back.
Thank God, right?
I've
Um,
I've moved a couple of times, but they've never asked for it back.
oh, thankfully. So I did not grow up with 30 something or know anything about it. Similar to how I asked about Cast a Deadly Spell, how would you compare it to a show nowadays, I guess, or like I think of like did you ever watch the show Parenthood from a couple years ago on NBC?
Yeah, well, the Parenthood is one of the shows. Parenthood, Brothers
Like
and
that
Sisters.
gives me 30 something vibes a little bit.
Yeah,
Like,
we
you know,
yeah, I frankly hold. I think the whole bunch of us on 30 something can lay claim to a lot of television, good, bad, and indifferent. It
right.
all yeah, we were because we were the first ones who kind of came in here and said, well, there's drama in these things that aren't dramatic or don't appear
Sure.
to be dramatic. And I was freelance when I started
Right.
working on it. So I was like I was working on a detective show in the mornings about, blackmail plots and people getting shot up in alleys. And then I get in the
Mhm.
car and I drive down to where Thirtysomething was shooting. And we talk about, can you get a babysitter? And
Right.
it was just we wanted to show some commonplace drama. The thing, and this is true in the 80s, it's true, was amazing. If you didn't see yourself on television, you didn't know you were a person.
Yeah.
So you would get letters, actual letters. People would sit down and write letters at that time. I wish my
Well,
friends were like this. I really like watching this show.
well, wasn't one of the episodes, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't one of them like it was one of the first kind of portrayals of gay stuff
Yeah,
because like one of the characters in there, again, I did not watch this show, sorry, but like I remember from my research though there was an episode where like there is like a explicit gay relationship
yeah.
technically.
He's
And
the character. Yeah,
apparently what I was going to say is that apparently there was pushback from the network about that kind of episode, which
there
makes
was a
sense.
lot. It makes sense, but and frankly, and that kind of pushback at that kind of period, I think made it. It was Richard Kramer wrote the episode, and I think
Hmm.
it's murder to try and be the first to do something
Yeah.
and to try and do this. And yes, there was pushback,
Hmm.
but not, I mean, not out of viciousness, just out of commerce.
Yeah.
They didn't like a lot of the things we talked about, but we thought we were just talking about like regular stuff, like people.
Right.
I mean, somebody asked me, why did you want to do the show? And I said, well, I read the first two scripts. And I said, well, I really want to do this because this is going to be a television show that tells people they can be angry at someone they love,
Hmm.
but it's not, that's what it is. And you're going to stay in this relationship. Yeah, I thought it was about, and I think everything, things like brothers and sisters, and oh God, a lot of them. You can usually identify them because the lighting is very soft and there's too much music.
Right.
But aside from that, those are usually, we would go, the first year I remember going through several directors of photography because advertising agencies kept swooping in
Hmm.
to take our DPs because they wanted their commercials to look like it.
Right. So you're like, I
Um,
want to snag him or her or
yeah,
whatever.
there's a lot of that too. But
Yeah.
yeah, and I'm hoping, it's not, boy, they put out discs about 10 years ago, and I was part of
Hmm.
that. And I was glad that happened.
Yeah.
But it's not streaming anywhere.
Right. So people can't even be like, oh, I loved that show back in the day or
Yeah.
whatever.
I'm
It
told
also
I've heard rumors that it has been upgraded digitally, but
nice.
I have heard no rumors about where it might end up.
It also gives me like not I didn't watch This Is Us, but like I can also understand like that also has a little bit of DNA in there too.
Yeah,
Like a tiny
yeah.
bit.
It's kind of a nice feeling when you see something which, somebody watched the show.
I think somebody watched the show. Like this is like I wouldn't say I don't expect you to have watched Dawson's Creek from the 90s, but like it almost like Dawson's parents feel like I'm like they would have been on that show probably, right?
Yeah,
Like if it's
yeah,
about a bunch of 30 somethings like, dealing with life, dealing with kids and all that. Even like Life Goes On, for example, like which I think was
yes.
around the same time as that show.
Well, it took about like a year and a half for
Yeah.
them, and then they were like, "What the hell is this? And how do we do it exactly like this?"
Right, exactly. Because you're
And
like, oh, you're able to do a little something, something, right?
yeah, yeah, but it's been. I'd like it. I'd like it to be streaming again. I'd like people to be able to see it. I've
Yeah.
looked at it, and it's yes, and I'm not embarrassed.
Yeah.
There are certainly more shoulder pads than you might want to see in an
There's
hour of
never enough shoulder
television.
pads.
Well, fine then. Then we've cleared that hurdle then.
A
But
hundred
yes,
percent.
Polly Draper, sometimes I thought you could land aircraft on her shoulder pads. But
Nothing wrong with
it was
that.
the 80s and 90s. But
Oh Lord.
it was a tremendous place to work, and just about everybody honest on other things.
Yeah.
Polly Draper, she's directed movies at this point.
Uh-huh. She was in a
Okay.
movie. Yeah, she has two kids. They were both on a Nickelodeon show. Um, her one son has like gone on and done like they both have been successful, but like the one has he was in Hereditary, he was in
Mm.
Old with Emma Shyamalan, Alex, you know, yeah, she was just in Shiva Baby not too long ago, which is fantastic with Rachel Sennett, plays her mom or aunt or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, she's picking
Um,
things. She gets to the
good
point where
time.
she's picking things. Yeah. And Ken
Yeah.
Olin became a director, and Tim Busfield's directing,
Mhm.
and Melanie's doing a lot of direct. Melanie Miron's doing a lot of directing.
She was the Babysitters Club, I think, right? Didn't she direct that movie back in the day?
Yes, I think she did.
I think she
I
did
think
too.
she did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which makes
Well,
sense because
that's
you're
two
like,
of
oh,
us.
talk about girls, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, talking a little bit more about just like, because again, I wanted to touch on some of this stuff because I'm just like fascinated by anybody in the entertainment industry. But to come back to Twilight Zone a little bit, like, I
Yeah.
guess to talk about some of the questions that we did, you know, we posed a little bit or just like talking about. But I want to pose some of these to you, and then we can kind of talk a little bit about them. So, like I kind of mentioned earlier, like, why do you think like we should still care about a writer that has been dead for more than 50 years? The show that they helped run is really old. Why should we still care about this kind of property? Like, why should we?
Well,
Yeah.
well, the glib answer is because it's really, really good. And good things don't stop being good just because there's a rotary phone on a desk somewhere, and somebody has to, where you're looking at something that's where you're looking at a day-to-day reality that you're not used to. So there's the fact that it's extremely good. It's extremely well crafted. It still delivers on many levels. It's not so much a sad part, so much as it's inevitability that many of the big twist endings from Twilight Zone episodes have lost their twistability over the years. They've become, they've stopped being twists and they've become punchlines. But in the 50s, you saw these shows once. And maybe you saw one or two of them again in the summer if it wasn't a summer replacement show from Desilu. And I guess this is weirdly the kind of nature of television and popular entertainment, which is something else to talk about. There was a time when you could see something that none of your friends had seen, and they were dependent upon you to tell them what it was, and because it was cool. We were looking for the cool. We were looking for the good thing. And when you're a kid, you're pretty much an omnivore. You go to everything. And you just, yeah, right. Whoa, spaceship. Yep, going right. Oh, Martians, Mars. It's on Mars. Going. And it's like a lot of them weren't really good, but you still love them because they were simple. They were very programmatic. I think Serling's writing is a writer who should be continued to taken seriously because he took it seriously himself. He He liked people. He wanted people to be better. He loved entertaining them. He loved being a television star. It's hard. I mean, I know people who just tell you they won't watch black and white, and I really don't know what's wrong with them. I don't understand. I mean, there must be some psychological reason to it because they can't be responding to the black and white. They must be responding to something else in the piece, and then they're saying, "Well, the reason I don't like it is because it's in black and white." And
Yeah.
that could usually mean that earlier in our entertainment histories, you could take a little more time in setup. I mean, holy crow. If you go back and look at Chinatown now, it takes almost 40 minutes to get to Faye Dunaway. There is a lot of intricate setup, and it's not boring, it's not dull, it's the guy's life. But there's this terrible, we're living in a world now of front loading and 10 seconds and 30 seconds and I can go away if I don't like it in 5 seconds. I can go if I don't like the main title. And we used to have a different relationship with our entertainment. We had to find it and we had to watch it, and then it was gone. Then VHS came along and the relationship changed somewhat. Our relationship to movies changed. It's going to the movies now isn't what it was. And
Yeah.
it was all about a communal experience, either a funny one or a scary one,
Totally. Or
Yeah.
a heartfelt one too.
Or
Yeah.
a heartfelt one, you knew. And And the pictures, let's face it, they are products. They are
Yeah.
engineered things meant to do certain things for you and to you. And if you're
Hmm.
ready for it, if you it's interesting, we watched Wild Robot the other
Yes.
night. And until like till like the third act, and this is not going to be a bad thing for a lot of people, it got a little Disney for me.
Sure.
But it was so freaking gorgeous that I'll give it to him. There are worse things. It's and it, we were talking about it. It is so full of Easter eggs that we can't imagine anyone is seeing
Hmm.
because there are jokes in there from Gravity, there are jokes in there from Bambi, there are
Right.
jokes in there from The Little Prince. Um, as my wife pointed out, there's a joke from a Richard Pryor routine.
Right.
See, you know what I'm talking about. But it's
Yeah, I
like,
don't, but it's just funny
oh
that,
no,
like, yeah.
but it's like it's one of those things that is I know a writer who said basically is I want to write the most obscure joke I can write because I
Yeah.
want it to sail over everybody else's head and just hit one guy and have him wonder how I got in his head.
True.
Um, but it's interesting. But no, I like that. It's so different from the graphic of the book. And
Hmm.
I assume, yeah, let him make a couple more. Worst things could
Yeah.
happen.
Why not?
But they are,
Exactly.
but they are, and you look at the crawl of credits at the end of something like Wild Robot, and you realize, Lordy, Lordy, there are thousands of people here.
Yeah.
And
And
it's
it's
like
so cool to see.
it's so cool. And it's like, are we all, it's like it's a zeitgeist. We're all working on the same thing. And our combined spirits are going to make this thing what it is. And hopefully people will get it.
Yeah.
Um,
Totally.
you gotta want to you gotta want to move people.
Yeah.
It's maybe an ego thing, and maybe that's the good part of ego. Yeah,
Hmm.
I say usually it's like, the only immortality I'm gonna get is if I can stick in somebody's head.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably somebody who probably doesn't know me and never will know me and doesn't read the credits, but something, a line, an
Yeah.
image, something sticks in their heads, and okay, I tagged up.
Yeah. And I'm sure that's why you do, one of the other questions is like, why are you a writer? But like, I think that encapsulates that. Like, you want to move somebody,
Yeah.
whether it be the one guy who's like, haha, or whatever, but you want to move someone. And that's, I think any artist wants to do
Yeah,
that.
which
They
is, I mean, like
want to do that kind of thing.
that's what's been the fun of doing plays again, is basically sitting in the back of a theater with 200 people
Yeah.
and sensing their experiences. I thought that's pretty good. I'll hang around too and see if they recognize me.
Yeah, totally. I did want to ask real quick because, again, talking about Rod Serling and the Twilight Zone, we were talking a little bit about movies, and one of the things about the Twilight Zone is that yes, it has this like wonderful legacy of the television show. It also has the unfortunate thing that there is the tragedy of the Twilight Zone the movie. I
Hmm.
wanted to kind of know like what your thoughts on that were, I guess. Like,
Well,
I don't know if you talk about it in the book or anything like that. Because again, can't talk about
no, it's
Twilight
pretty
Zone,
much,
Rod
yeah,
Serling there.
it's pretty much the edge. There's a
Yeah.
great book about the Twilight Zone trial. I think the movie may have been a bad idea. I think the George Miller remake of Nightmare at 20,000 Feet is the best segment of the movie because he basically did exactly what the original did, but did it with his sensibility, which was just to go in there and be very intense for about 35 minutes. And it worked. The remakes of Kick the Can and It's a Good Life are just there's no reason to do them. And of course, the god awful stuff with John Landis. Uh, it's just
Yeah, with
like,
the first
nobody
story.
should, yeah, nobody should die on a movie.
Yeah.
It's
And
it's
yeah,
not,
it's crazy
yeah,
to, and it's one of those things where, that was the first, not the only, I'm sure, but it was the first high profile version of that, because not only do you have a kind of uh a known TV actor who I think was a little more down on his luck, perhaps, who took this job,
Yeah.
um, who wasn't expecting to die, obviously, and who also has a literally very famous daughter who's nowadays, but Jennifer Jason Leigh, but having that kind of tragedy, and I don't know, it's just I can agree with that. Like I think like it is a fine film, but it's like this, The Crow, and also unfortunately Rust with Alec Baldwin. It's these things of like now it's overshadowed almost by like the tragedy of what happened on set,
Yeah, I mean,
which
if
is
you want to,
unfortunate.
yeah, you can collect a lot. You can, they're all over the place. Somebody fell under a
Yeah.
train in Dr. Zhivago.
Yeah.
And it's like, and and a lot of stunt people have lost limbs and lost their
Right.
livelihood. It's not an easy job. All you're doing is you're trying to get people to put some money on down and come eat a popcorn or something.
Right.
Uh,
But then this all happens, and then now you're like, why did we push too far? Like, what happened?
I think
Or why were we not
I think every,
prepared?
I think everybody just walked away from it.
Yeah,
Uh,
I agree. Yeah.
it's
It's a
the movie
sticky
just kind of
thing.
disappeared. Then the movie just kind of disappeared,
Yeah.
which
And I
is
think it's
probably the
still,
best you can expect.
yeah, I think it's still
But as I say,
enjoyed.
The George Miller is the best segment, and he was
It
coming off
is.
of it from Mad Max,
Yeah. That's a good one.
yeah, if you could, but I mean, like it's like kick the can. They tried to tell a different story, and the same thing for
Yeah.
and it's
It's a
like
good
no,
life.
there was nothing wrong with the stories, and I think that's George Miller's thing. There's nothing wrong with the story. This is a great story. I just want to tell it my way.
Yeah, totally.
I have different tools I can use,
And
and it's a great
yeah,
segment. It really is a great segment. It's the last one of the movie, and it's really good.
it's really good. And I think like the other thing is that there's the tragedy behind it, but there's also like that's a really good scene. But also even just the opening is also really good with Dan Aykroyd and that other guy. I don't
Yeah, I
remember
think. Oh,
that other guy. I don't remember
Albert
his
Brooks.
name.
It's
There we
Albert
go.
Brooks.
Yes, 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 yes. You're
Yes,
right. I was
it's
like, oh
great.
my God, wait.
Yeah,
So that scared the hell out of kids, which is
yeah,
wonderful. Love that. But yeah, it's just, yeah, it's hard not to talk about Twilight Zone and also not just bring that up. And I think what your kind of thoughts are on it, I completely understand, because I think it's still enjoyed by people. Like there are people who are just like, oh no, this was a cool little movie I watched back in the 80s when I was a kid,
yeah,
or like whatever it is. But ultimately, like it's a cool little horror anthology, but you know, um,
yeah. I mean,
it
when it comes
has
to horror,
that kind of
yeah,
shout on it.
that when it comes to horror anthologies, I'm a sucker for Amicus movies and things like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I'm
I
just
love
thinking,
the
it's
original Tales from the Crypt. It's so good.
it is so good. It's
It's really
because
good.
it's really good, and Asylum is pretty good too.
Haven't seen that
Um,
one. I haven't gotten to
oh
name
really?
as much. Not really, but
That's
I
I think
should.
it's probably on YouTube, and it's the same. It's like a lot of it's the same. It's an Amicus film, and it's a lot. I think there are Robert Bloch short stories in that one.
Yeah, it's like that in Hammer films. Like I know they're not the same, but they're very related almost. So
Yeah.
that's kind of a blind spot for me as a horror fan. But who doesn't love Christopher Lee and things? You know what I
What's
mean?
not
So
yeah, yeah.
like that's
No,
a
they're
Hammer
the
thing,
yeah that what's it yeah well Amicus came along and tried to give Hammer a run for the money,
They did.
and their little trick was the reason they did the anthology films, the anthology stories, is that they could get bigger actors for shorter schedules
Sure.
because each story only took like about 3 or 4 days to shoot.
Hmm.
No, Hammer films are lovely. I like the Hammer Mummy from 1959. I think it's really good.
I haven't seen it. Again, I haven't really, again, blind spot, but I should get into
You
more.
might be. I don't think you'd be disappointed. I don't know if
I
you'd
don't
be
think so
interested,
either.
but yeah,
I think I could be interested. Like for me, the furthest I go back is like um maybe Frankenstein and The Bride of Frankenstein. James Whale. There you go.
James
That's about
Well,
as
yeah,
far as back as I go. And of course I did want to watch Nosferatu, and I will probably. I think I tried watching it and I was just like, okay, I need to like be in another headspace for this.
yeah.
But
Did
being
you
a
ever see
silent film.
Shadow of the Vampire?
No, when's that
That's
out?
so that's must be 10 years now. That's about making Nosferatu.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I think that's the title. I think that's the title. And
That's what
it's
Google's for. I'll look it up later.
okay. You know what
Yeah,
I
no,
think
totally.
arguably is the best, most recent episode of Twilight Zone,
What do you
and
what do we think?
that's Nope.
You know what? Oh, Joe, you gave me just yeah, it is.
It
Like
isn't. It isn't, but it is.
I can see though, because like I mean, first off, Nope was really good. I don't care what anybody says about like, oh, like it's a weak entry and like Jordan Peele's Uber. I'm like, fuck off, like really. Um,
Listen, if you can't,
all
if
of his
you're
stuff's
three, if
good.
you're three movies in, if you can't make the one you want to make, what's the point?
Right. And I think like, but like you said, like I'd like to hear more what you think about that. But like, I mean, no, totally. Like it's very much like it's dark, but it's
It's
very much like
dark.
it's a alien story. There's also like this just childhood trauma that's in here with Stephen Yeun's character. Like it's a whole thing. Why would you say that Nope is not an episode of the Twilight Zone, but
Well,
it is? Why do you say
well,
that?
I don't know. I would say I say it just because it's impossible to imagine being able to do Nope when Twilight Zone was being made. It just would have been, it's just like, I think Nope represents, and there are things in Nope that, I admire, but I don't like. I mean, it's kind of like, I really don't, yeah, we don't, no spoiler alert here, but ooh, that chimpanzee comes out of nowhere.
I know it's a
Um,
little jarring. You're like, wait a minute.
yeah, yeah. I think it's a small cast. Really, it irises down very, very small. It's a family. It's a family under stress. It's a family under pressure. It's a family that learns to sacrifice. And I know people who tell me that the last shot isn't real. I tell you, I believe the last shot's real and he's okay. So that there is, I don't think it's a big stretch to break it down and find. It's also, we're going to keep the family together. We're going to be all right. We're going to do this. We are going to survive.
Mhm.
There's all these sources lent against us, but we're actually going to end up better people than that's, and you can say, oh, that's really kind of corny. But
Mhm.
maybe if you don't, it's a flying jellyfish.
It
You want to,
is.
I mean, if you're going to start, I mean, if you're going to start nitpicking on something like that, because I, for the life of me, haven't the foggiest idea what that thing is or why it comes out of the saucer. But it's kind of like I'm figuring Jordan did. Uh,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
but I guess it's because we look at it. It's it's a half a dozen speaking roles, maybe.
And I think like it's so cool to have somebody who has such a kind of grip on his own voice and his own style when he's him being a filmmaker. But yeah, this is cool to see his idea of what an alien movie is. And
Yeah,
this is his
yeah.
alien movie. And like that's awesome because it is something it will always be very unapologetically, black centric, which is cool. Totally fine with that. We're following a family of color who is just trying to survive after their
Yeah,
father's death and everything and all this. But I don't know. I just think like it is it's still within there. I don't think he's had a miss quite yet. And it's
I
cool
don't
that
think so. I mean,
yeah,
I totally admire the guy, and really, my vague memory of it is that Nope was his first chance to spend a lot of money,
he did. It
and he
was
shot it on film, and he did all the things that guys when they make the break
mhm.
do. It's a gorgeous film. It really
It's so
is.
good.
And it is scary. And it's scary because of silence. It's
Yep.
scary because of noise.
And the
It's scary.
unknown.
And the unknown. It's scary because of music playing at the wrong speed,
Hmm.
which is impossible because of what they were doing. But yeah, I mean, I felt it way more than the actual Twilight Zone that he hosted.
Sure.
I saw more. I don't know what's thicker than DNA. Really, really blood shared.
Right.
Really like a circulatory system shared between the Twilight Zone and Nope.
Oh yeah, and I don't think he would at all.
Oh,
I'm sure there is an article out there somewhere where somebody's asked him this or whatever, and he's probably said like, oh no, absolutely, that there's a little bit of that in there too. How could there not
yeah,
be?
yeah. I don't.
Yeah,
It couldn't be. It couldn't be. His whole, his career up until now. has been based on those moments of real. I mean, you could say Get Out,
Hmm.
really,
I do think too.
Because Get Out itself is dependent on our expectations, particularly the
And
last
being
reel. Yeah.
right, exactly. And being switched and all that. Yeah, no, totally. I would definitely see Get Out as like a like kind of interesting Twilight Zone episode or something. And
Yeah.
I think that just shows that if anything, to kind of wrap up a little bit
Mm.
more, a little bit, what is your favorite episode of the Twilight Zone? Just to ask, like, what would you say?
My favorite Twilight Zone episode is one of the 19 hours. They made one season hours.
Hmm.
And it's an episode called On Thursday We Leave for Home.
Okay.
And it opens up on this just desert blasted planet where some pilgrims they had left the earth and they were trying to find a new paradise, and they landed on this rock, and it just there was no survival there. And someone amongst them, one man, kind of seized control and became a very fatherly figure to the entire community and kept the community alive. Literally by keeping says, we're going to do this. We're going to be all right. We're going to get through this together. We're going to be fine. It's going to be all right.
Right.
I'll tell you about Earth. I'll tell you about the Earth we left. And then one day a rescue ship shows up. And the guys get off the rescue ship and say, we've been looking for you. We're sorry it took so long, but we're here to take you home. And the rest of the drama is about one man losing all his authority. He now no longer means anything to these people he's kept alive. It's a tremendous drama. It's probably his best. It's like, it's like, and when you first meet him, he's very beneficent, and then you realize there's a bit of an ego going on here.
Hmm.
It's a pip. But if you want the
Nice.
classics, you can always do Monsters Due on Maple Street.
Yeah.
Time Enough at Last.
I,
Uh,
I know what I'm going to be watching. I need to find On Thursday We Leave for Home. I'm going to look that
yeah,
up.
it's
Need to
season.
find
Yeah,
that.
it's season. It's Hey, if you find the Blu-rays, you can hear my commentary.
Oh, there you
Uh,
go. I need to go
yeah,
find it. I really
yeah.
should be owning the any sort of physical media of the Twilight Zone. Just have. It's like the Friday the 13th box set for me. I should have that, but I don't yet. Like I need those.
I'm a big fan of physical media. If I
Oh
don't
yeah,
own
me
it,
too.
I don't. If I don't own it, I don't own it.
Oh, me too, me too. And so, like, I need that Friday the 13th box set because that's just what I need. But also, like, I feel like I also need that Twilight Zone, whatever they have, because I'm just like, oh no, I
The
need that.
Blu-rays are their Blu-rays are beautiful.
Yeah,
They are transferred from the black and white nitrate negatives. Lots of good, and there's lots of good fun
nice.
extras on the set. And
Hell yeah,
I got to do two commentaries with Mark Zekri, who wrote the Twilight Zone companion.
nice. I would say my favorite. I have to always give it up for The Hitchhiker. I think it was one of the first
Um,
ones I saw, and so much so that I literally took the ending monologue and I tried to do it in my acting class, and my theater teacher was like, I don't think that's gonna work as like a monologue for you, but it's fine. But I was just so moved by it. Um,
that's her. It's the monologue. It's like when she comes from the phone booth, right?
yes,
She's
yes,
walking from the phone
exactly.
booth, and she has this. It's a disturbing about. I
It
think she
it
feels a
is.
lightness. She feels I understand now.
Yes, it's so good. I mean, the actress, unfortunately, she died of suicide back in the
Yeah.
day, but I mean, she was so good. It's hard for me not to think that Herc Harvey didn't somehow see that episode and was like, you know what? I think I
Yeah.
need to make Carnival of Souls. It's hard not to think that, like, because I'm just like, so many similarities. Like, it's just,
Well, the Herc Harvey
so
movie
good.
is it looks like the same car. Uh,
Literally. And again,
and
like,
somebody, yeah,
so good.
it's, but yeah, yeah,
It's
it's interesting. You know,
crazy.
if you like Hitchhiker, try. Oh, I think it's called "And Then the Sky Was Open,"
Ooh, it's
which
another episode.
is it's an episode, a half-hour episode with
Nice.
Rod Taylor, because I may have the title wrong. Rod Taylor and oh crap, I think of the actor's name. Timothy
I'll have
Hutton.
to look at.
James Hutton. No, Timothy Hutton's father, Jim Hutton.
Ooh,
Uh,
so Jim Hutton's in it. Okay, cool. I like Timothy Hutton, so I'll just be like, well, who's his daddy? And then I'll have to find out what Twilight Zone episode he was in.
yeah, yeah. Oh, Jim Hutton. Oh, it's Jim Hutton's a nice guy, I thought. But
Yeah, I
he
can
died
only.
too young too.
Oh my God, of course. Literally, his son is the youngest man to win an Oscar. Good for him.
Is he
Good for
really? That means he beat what's his puss from Goodbye Girl.
I don't know who that is, but
It's the no. This is I'm
oh,
sorry.
is
Not my
it
my aphasia is
sitcom?
kicking in bad now.
Is that the sitcom guy? Was he on a sitcom?
No, no. Richard Dreyfuss is the guy I was thinking about. I thought he was like,
Okay.
but I couldn't
Yeah,
believe
no.
that he was the youngest guy to.
Yeah,
I could
no, he
believe Tiffany.
didn't. I mean, it could have been beaten by Haley Joel. It could have because he was nominated. But yeah, oh, actually, he was supporting. Never mind, lead actor. Yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
I mean, he was 20 when he got that, and like, it's a fantastic role in Ordinary People.
Oh,
So it's just like, yeah. But I mean, hey, talent, man. Like, you got it somewhere. I don't know where, but you got it, dude. Like,
yeah.
good for you. You
Yeah, I
know?
mean, it's like it's he's in it, but it's not built around him. But it's a good episode. It's got a lot to do with like, are we here or not? It's like
Right.
three astronauts go up in a rocket, they come down, and they're all in the hospital. But
Nice.
all of a sudden, one guy turns around, and he's not there anymore.
Hmm.
What do you mean? I said, well, no, there were only two of us. What do you mean there were only two of us? Is it what's going on here?
I'm already intrigued.
Yeah, I think it's called. And then the sky was open.
Yeah, I'll
No.
have to look that up. I gotta look up that
Okay.
one and the other one, and I'll just be like, oh yeah, Joe told me about those.
Yes.
But yeah, I think if anything, like just to kind of wrap up and close on it, if you will, I
Sure.
think the reason like Twilight Zone just has always stayed around, it's because these stories in a way are timeless. It does not matter like your color, creed, sexuality, religion, any of these things. Like these stories are just very timeless. They were put in, I think they were done thoughtfully and made to ruffle some people a little bit, but not in a bad way. Like just to make people, you know, unsettle you maybe, or to make you think or whatever, which I honestly think is what art is kind of there to do. It's to put the mirror back onto society. It's to question things. That's all of what art does.
I'd
So
like
I
to think
think
that
it's
yeah,
huge.
I'd like to think that if you come to the Twilight Zone with an open heart
Yes.
and not worry about the black and white or the old cars or the that you'll find under the surface, not only the surface of the look, but the surface of the apparent story, and listen to the music of his dialogue. Rod Serling's dialogue is it's like musical notation.
Mhm.
And the actors loved it, and the actors loved saying it. If you
Yeah.
lean into Serling at his best in the Twilight Zone, you're going to find. I think you're going to find. I think you'll be surprised. I think you'll find a richness that you might not have expected, and I think if you're a creative person, there might be some inspiration there.
I think so too. And again, even if you're just a horror or sci-fi fan, it's just kind of a nice, I think it's a nice warm blanket for people to
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
watch and
So you
have.
slap them in. Yeah, after you finish watching Target Earth, you watch a couple of Twilight Zones.
Right. Right. Well, Joe, it was really nice to get a chance to
Oh,
talk
this
to
has been
you.
great.
Like,
This
it's
has
been
been
really
great.
nice. Like, it's been just cool to have somebody like talk to, about like the entertainment business. And yeah, it can be a hellish business for some and whatever, but honestly, like, it's so cool. There's such cool things about it. And the fact that you've been able to make such a career of it and be
Yeah.
able to do this, like, if anything, you'll be remembered for it. People will be
Oh,
like, oh, I loved
oh.
Cast a Deadly Spell. Oh, I loved the things that he did. Whenever you shove off, I mean,
Well,
that's the whole thing it is.
that's very encouraging. I'm not planning to shove off anytime soon, but
No, of
you
course
never
not. But
know.
when the time comes, you hopefully are
I hope
you
so.
want to have that. And
Yeah,
that's why this book is important too, is
yeah,
like being able to talk about something that obviously means something to you and somebody who means something to you. And
yeah.
that's what I think is really cool.
I didn't want to. It's not a biography. It's really personal impressions of what I
Yeah.
got from his writing and how I feel his writing works.
Your own
So
analysis of it.
it's
Yeah.
my own analysis, but also I think it'll lead you. I think it leads the reader to think about it for themselves and go back and watch the episodes.
Yeah. And again, what's the title of that book again?
It is Rod Serling at 100.
And
One
that'll be
writer's
in the show notes.
acknowledgement.
And it'll be in the
Okay.
show notes too.
And it's available through Simon& Schuster and at Amazon and from the publisher Fayetteville Mafia Press.
Yes, you can get it online and all that stuff. Again, I'll make sure to put the
Absolutely.
notes in there.
Thank you.
Do you have any like website or social media that you want to plug or anything like that?
Not right now, and I think Zuckerberg's taking the rest of it away from me at this point. So,
Right? Literally
yeah.
crazy. And also, including this Rod Serling book, do you have any other like upcoming projects that you want to like tease a little bit or anything like that?
Well, I'm hoping I'm going to get another production of a play this year. I
Nice.
don't have enough detail about that. I've written a couple of other books. I've written a book I like very much about screenwriting called A Screenwriter's Companion. It's available
Mhm.
in all the usual places too. And I wrote a book many years ago about Joy Lansing, a minor actress from the 50s and 60s and 70s. And that's going to be reprinted next year in a new
Nice.
edition.
I'll have to find the bibliographies of those and put them in the show notes too. I'll try my best
Please
to.
feel free to do so.
Be like, hey, check this out. Yeah, and again, support independent books and support
Yes.
independent authors. Like that's why I wanted to do this, and it
Yep.
ended up being a conversation about a whole lot of stuff. But I'm totally
I like
happy with how
that.
it's gone.
Good.
I
Yeah, maybe we'll do
exactly.
another one. Yeah, we'll do another one.
I'd be down. Like, listen, like Cult Cinema Circle, man. Like, you can come back and talk to me about whatever you want.
I don't
But
know.
yeah,
Let's come back and like really, really deep dive on Target Earth.
true. Or I could also have you on, or at least like get a snippet for you if I ever cover Cast a Deadly Spell. Because as the writer, of course you could speak to some of the other things, but you might have been on set a few times. You could tell me a little bit about that too. So
I
I
can tell
don't
you
know.
something else. It was like cold
Yeah,
and wet in January we shot it. Well, this
I
has
can
been
only
fun.
imagine.
Again, thank you so much for asking me over.
Of course. Thank you so much. And as always, if you want to follow the show on social media, you can do so. All the social media links are in the show notes. I'm on Instagram, Blue Sky, and Letterboxd at all the regular links that I normally have. You'll see there. Follow me on the podcatcher of choice that you listen to, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever. And until next time, take care. Bye.